scaled in such a way. I mean, water projects are never easy, but to be fund them and get them implemented, constructed, and built, they're really fixed to where they fall in that timeline. I mean, really the variable that we have to discuss is land retirement. Absolutely, that is the big one. That is the controversial topic that nobody wants to talk about. But how
this kind of timeline,
implement those programs.
You know, some of this stuff, and you know, if a grower, you know, if a grower's getting started and you know they've got more years left in that field, I'd almost be empathetic to say you're on the books or you're in an area that would be good to retire, but maybe give them the.
Well, we're not going to talk about the ways that the county should move forward with their GSA.
Well,
we just need to focus on, as MID GSA, what are your reactions to this?
Yeah, I just don't know if the speed at which you request the other GSAs to implement their projects to help expedite that is, you know, completely reasonable.
Right.
I don't know if you could just say, well, figure it out right.
Right.
There is a due diligence when it comes to accurately determining how to go about it. And they're happening right now, so there's dust in the air still.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's up to each GSA to figure out how they're going to implement it, but we need to consider how the timing, what level, what those impacts could be.
What we want to propose in order to accommodate our growers within the whole plan.
Exactly.
And the greater local economy as a whole, right?
Right.
And so, so I'm hearing, you know, maybe we want to request more aggressive timeline on the projects. The other idea is, you know, to discuss the effects of leaving the line where it is and how those effects are going to be mitigated.
Well,
I mean, that's another way to look at it. Is
we haven't gone there yet, really, to make the ask or the request and say, well, you know, our collaboration is going to show that it's going to be difficult on our growers.
So anyway, you want to talk about that now?
yeah. So it's just, for instance, again, this is a complete example, but for instance, if the line drops below this average gray line depth and 3 of the domestic wells within this section go dry, because even though it's in the MID GSA, we believe it's due to external forces, you know, will that be mitigated in some form or fashion? Or does it need to be mitigated? I don't know.
Hey Dave, I got a comment. I agree with almost everything you've said today. There's a couple things you didn't say that I want to bring up. And the current owners of out-of-district land are not necessarily the owners that made the decision to keep that land out of district. So they're not your enemies. Some of them are victims of previous landowners. But that ground does carry the burden. At some point in some time, somebody made a decision not put it in the district, not pay the tax. I agree with you. So something has to be done there. The other thing is that within the Madera Irrigation District, there is still some room, and I don't know where it is in this model, but there's still some elasticity because you still have some people running wells in the district that need to be used, and you're a huge proponent of it. I know I've heard you say it before. We got to get everybody in the district off their wells when there's surface water available. And so there's a little room for the district to make some improvement in that area.
Right.
So those are just 2 points.
I agree with you, Bill, and the thing is matter of fact, even this year, we have more and more guys who haven't taken water in like almost every.
No, progress is being made.
The real problem we had, and we have is, and a couple of years ago at our annual meeting, we put up a map, and I got it from Madera Pump, and you know, the problem is you get, especially some of the smaller growers, not all smaller growers, but when the further south you are, the less it costs to pump, you know, out of the ground, right? And so it's really difficult to tell those people, hey, quit pumping, and we had a lady in her, well, I assume it was her husband in here the other day. If the lower we could price water, the further south we could get more guys to hook up, even though I'm hooking up. And so, the district is working on that. We've got a bunch of irons in the fire, and we're trying the best we can, and over time here, to try to keep this price of water as low as we can. So more guys, which is one of the reasons we're hoping we can entice some guys by this early on a year like this, free water, a month, half price, anything we could do.
No, we use it, and we did it, and we've done it, and I put my reservoir in, and I'm on the river, and I'm with you.
No,
I'm with you. All I'm saying is there is a measure of improvement that the district can make by getting these guys off their wells for in lieu of recharge in years like this. And now we've had 2 years out of 3 years when we had a chance to shut every well off in the district.
And
Yeah,
Bill,
there's more to be done too.
And
I
I'm
don't
just
want-
saying,
I don't want it to imply that we're done and we have no work ahead
no,
of
no,
us.
I
We
just
have-
wanted that to be said.
no, and I
In
understand.
this meeting, because I know that the out-of-district guys are, you know, they got a burden to carry, and they're gonna take a lot of trees out. There's just no easy buttons there. But I just wanted to, you know.
Yeah,
Well,
we've got that, we've got more recharge efforts, we've got connecting more people, there's all the above, and there's a mountain of work still to be done in the district to improve them. Right now, we could be moving more water if we had more places to put it.
I can't wait. We have, there was a major landowner in the district who never used a drop of water. And that property just changed hands recently. And the new owner is putting in reservoirs and plans to use and take all the water he can take. You know, I'm ready to do a dance because it's a pretty sizable chunk. It'll take a lot of water. And so, but Bill, your point's well taken, we know it, and so we're doing everything we can to help guys get hooked up.
yeah, and let me, and so, you know, we've been saying, and, you know, we've looked at our numbers and said, so we're historically balanced, yet when you look at David's engineering numbers, it shows MID has a deficit. And the deficit occurs because they've taken 2017 land use, or 2015 land use, and applied it all the way back through their modeling period. And the difference is they took the actual historic water supplies during those years. So they took historic water supplies with 2015 land use. And so we've said all along that doesn't work because our water supplies and the way we manage water would have been different had we had a higher demand, right? Which the higher demand occurs later on in the 2015 year. And so, but we've said, but that's a highly conservative number then to move forward with. So that's been the number that we've actually been utilizing for balance. And so that's why when you see MID's numbers, there is a deficit there because we are using the highly, highly conservative number. And so with that, we have now identified all of these different projects that we are going to continue to do throughout this implementation period, even though we are relatively balanced as we sit here today.
That's not
And those,
a bad thing, because you know what land use is doing
Well,
in
exactly.
the district. And you
Yes.
know, just the grower that Dave mentioned, what's
Exactly.
happening out there.
Yes.
And that goes from
right.
whatever to 4 feet.
Yes, and those projects include things though, like on-farm recharge and incentivizing landowners to utilize surface water when it's available and things like that. And so that's how we're trying to get to your point of everybody needs to utilize surface water when it's available. So those projects actually are being modeled in here and should be reflected in this brown line. The MID's projects, those projects are, you know, are included in this. And that's still the result is the answer.
Thank you.
Yes.
Also, for the record, well, those guys out there are our enemy. In fact, a lot of them are my friends.
Yes. And a lot of them are also MIT
No,
landowners.
and I know that.
Yeah,
And many of us are cross-dressers. I mean, you know, we got a lot of district
Yeah,
land, and we got
exactly.
some
Yeah.
out-of-district land,
Yes.
you know,
I
so.
like that.
So,
Probably should use a new term.
Oops.
well then, Brian, I don't know, as far as taking recommendations to our board.
I have a question on the minimum thresholds. So at the last Madera, the majority coordination,
Tech-
whatever the
technical
that meeting
workshop,
was,
yeah.
yes, that was specific to this GSP.
Yes.
There were a couple of graphs that were shown that show, and at Chowchilla as well. There were graphs that showed minimum threshold where that little
Yes.
line came down beyond minimum threshold.
Right.
Is this adjusted, or is this still part of that same modeling?
Yeah, So things are, you know, evolving around here, and what was presented at that was, again, just some and concepts for people to weigh in. Now, don't exactly quote me on this because I would have to go back to David's and confirm, but I think at that point in time, they were actually not using average year scenarios here, and they were using a highly, highly conservative dry scenario. So this line was actually dipping much lower in here because of that. And so I think at that point they set it closer to this bottom because it was dipping so much further. So now that they've kind of changed this to average, we still want to look at dry year scenarios, which is why now that we're looking at this scenario with a 10-year extension essentially. So similar but not exactly the same. And some of that came out of the discussion actually at that workshop of of where people thought the thresholds should be, and different concepts that were floated about there. So, which is the point of the workshops, and that's the point of this meeting too, is to take the public and everybody's ideas and try to mesh them all into something that actually works in the GSP.
Even before you hit that minimum threshold, won't you trigger the under zero effect because of domestic wells?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's just whether or not the subbasin and the GSAs think that's
It's
acceptable
how you
or not.
define that, yeah.
And if we do allow this to occur, is mitigation one, is it necessary? And then two, how should it actually be done? Some people don't think it's necessary, others do. So,
There's a tremendous amount of state money available for the disadvantaged communities. It's just giving them access to it.
Well-
But that is going to be one of the biggest problems about that drop, is the data.
well, but I mean, this is all, it doesn't, although all Madera is essentially considered a DAP, I mean, this is, this could be any domestic.
Sure, no, I understand that,
Yeah.
but it impacts
Right, exactly, yes.
those
So,
questions.
Yeah.
You have to set up some sort of fund or something that people pull on.
Potentially, yeah, and so that's the question. So I think maybe if we break this down, we can simplify a little more. So the first question, Brian and Dave, is, are you okay with this brown trend line? Essentially, again, acknowledging this as a complete example, and very conceptually speaking, or do you want this, do you want to see if this can be adjusted somehow by,
The thing is,
More
you just
aggressive
adjust the
approach.
numbers and you just adjust the numbers. And we just got done saying that under the drought circumstance, we saw that dip even more. So how much can we trust?
you have to,
Like, you
you
can
have to
change the
assume that
numbers
there's
to
going
get
to
a-
be, unless we have an extremely wet 20-year scenario here.
So I just don't know on which route to take when it comes to that. Are we just accepting the numbers and then put it into the model and saying we just accept what's going on and that is what it is, or do we require them to change or numbers so that we see on paper a more desirable vision?
Well, it's, again, we're talking in concepts here, but is it, are you guys okay with the trend continuing this way for a period of time before it starts to correct?
And obviously, if you hit that minimum threshold, you have to react. You're going to be out of compliance with your plan, so there'll have to be actions taken through the GSAs and GSP to adjust.
Yeah, I want to talk about the trend.
Again, it goes back to say we say no.
What happens is this model shows that you don't start to flatten out or reverse the trend for 15 years.
Exactly. Which is probably timed with all of the projects starting to be implemented.
And also consider if it's a average, likely you're not going to have any of your recharge projects providing an input to the aquifer because an average year is not creating a great recharge benefit. So, again, this is so difficult to actually, can't predict what the hydrology is going to do, and the performance of the projects is based on the hydrology.
That's why we're leaving the decisions.
It's very much just an approach discussion.
Yes, exactly. Okay, well, think about that. So that's question one, is are you okay with this, no, we're not table, but are you okay with this brown trend line? The second question is, when we start to see effects such as domestic wells or other effects that might need to be mitigated, do you have any ideas of how you want this approached?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I think the guy that's doing the overdrafting should pay for the mitigation,
Okay.
just that simple. If we're hauling water in here, trying our darndest to keep the water level up in the entire basin, then it should be up to the guys that are overdrafting. And that's what I'm gonna call every bit of that, is overdraft. The guys that are causing the problem should pay for the problem.
I need to determine who's causing the problem.
How do we determine who's causing the problem?
Yeah, is it your next door neighbor? Is it the neighbor up the street?
No, I think we're talking GSA-wide.
GSA.
Yes. Yeah. Correct? We're
Yeah,
talking GSA-wide.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about
I mean,
the GSAs.
and then the GSA could figure out a way to fund that through determining who's causing the problem, but high level at this point.
Essentially, any overdrafting that's occurring is contributing to the problem, so. Okay, so we're gonna come back to the trend
Brian,
line,
what do
the
you-
Yeah,
mitigation.
that sounds reasonable
Okay.
to me.
So the next question is, and it somewhat relates to the trend line, but I think we can identify that differently. Are you okay with the concept of the measurable objective being identified as the average from 2040 through 2090? Wherever that trend line falls. Or do you want the objective higher? Or do you want the objective
Again,
lower?
You could throw in a massive drought in there, and then that's the average, measurable objective is the average based on an assumed 10-year drought. So again, assumptions that make like lines as if their actual information is hard. So, I mean, it's, to me, I don't see a problem with that measurable objective if the modeling data was used to be an extreme to show an average number, and that's our target of getting back to that zone. But if you, what would be the option? Say if you want 60%, you want the average plus a little swell.
I mean, honestly, the objective can be anywhere,
Yeah.
the
Well,
GSA
because-
design said it, I mean, it can be at the top point.
This
it
is
can
what
be-
we submit to the water board, right?
This is what's going to DWR.
So, you know, it was said in the meeting, it's kind of general, is, you know, we don't want to set ourselves up for failure either. We want to have enough cushion that as a whole,
Right.
we achieve our goals.
Yeah.
Um,
And, yeah, with the the measurable objective is just that, it's the objective. So, it's just, do you guys like that concept? Like this, again, this for instance, if you take into account all the different assumptions, theoretically, the measurable objective would be higher than the water service currently is.
I think that's, for lack of anything else, I think that's,
Okay.
Yeah. I think if we-
as put forward in this.
Okay, so we're okay with average on that. And then the next question is the minimum threshold. So are you guys okay with the concept of taking a drought period and extending it out a 10-year time frame?
Yeah,
Setting a threshold there? Or do you want the threshold set higher? Do you want it set above the average domestic well depths? Do you want it set?
So that's what
Lower,
I mean,
do you want
if we're
to-
doing this as a GSA-wide deal, there'd be a lot of benefit to not go below the average domestic well. There'd be a lot less mitigated damages, or a lot less damages that need to be mitigated. But whether it's a reasonable objective, a reasonable deal for us to hit and the project to be implemented and recharge to take effect and retirement to have just the big picture together so we don't all fall apart. You know, moving that to the domestic well average for me would probably be my, you know, silent goal. Would be like, well, that's the best way not to affect these disadvantaged communities and residents that are needing that water supply that won't have to somehow figure out how they're gonna either pay for it themselves or get some support to pay for it, one or the other. But whether that's gonna be what keeps us on track is my inventory.
Was it been determined if dropping below the minimum threshold in any given year, that becomes a, like probationary issue with the state? state? Has that been determined, has that been clarified?
So we're still working through that and trying to, what's the trigger essentially?
Right.
So,
One well, is it a percentage of your wells? Is it?
One
if
time,
You have
is it-
one dip during a drought, is that such a, that's not clear yet.
yeah, we're still working through that.
Obviously,
Yeah.
you want to avoid that if possible.
Yeah, I know you said it where you're at, but I'm just like,
Yeah.
because
One well.
there was some conversation of if you drop below that minimum threshold,
Right.
will the
Right.
state step in, will they intervene?
Yeah.
And so, I guess, if you end up with 3 consecutive years in a row and you drop below that minimum, or you drop to that minimum threshold, you go below, let's say with Brian with your proposal, keeping it minimum threshold at the average depth. If you drop below because you've had 3 dry years in a row, now are you triggering state intervention because you've gone below it? So maybe you do want to set it a little bit lower.
Well, that's exactly what my concern is, saying, hey, in my mind,
Right, yeah,
my
exactly, yeah.
silent goal
Yeah.
is to not drop below that, not to affect these residential wells as much as possible.
And one point just to make, I mean, this is, one happens to have 6, but there's obviously certain
Yeah.
areas of the county that you go into a section and there's a lot more than that. But we have some of these rural residential development.
You know, the thing is we're worried about going below the minimum threshold to trigger some kind of punitive action by the state and so forth. And so some people might argue set the threshold as low as you can. That way you never break it, you know. But in actual fact, you know, we're looking at lines and thresholds and so forth. But in actual fact, this is water.
Yeah, you don't want to get anywhere close to that.
Yeah,
Right,
I mean-
exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is not just squiggly lines, this is water. And when you start running people out of water because you've set your goals too low, it's not a good thing. And so, I mean, if there was a way to adjust as you went,
Yeah, and so there are, during the implementation period, during the implementation period, there are interim milestones. Those just haven't been quite vetted and identified yet with the group, and so those will occur during the implementation period, in which case you could do triggers there. But, I mean, the other thing is, I mean, I go back to my engineering classes, and it's like everything, you know, when you do things, when you do calculations, you make a lot of assumptions. And then when those assumptions vary significantly, right, then your results vary significantly too. And so I have to think, and you know, nobody said this for sure or not, that, you know, through this process, you're making a lot of assumptions. You're making assumptions on climate and such, and a lot of things that are beyond your control. So you have to think, if we go into, you know, a massive drought for 20 years, you know, everything's going to change. Just like if we go into a really wet period for 20 years, everything's going to change. And so I think as long, you know, we outline the assumptions and it's very clear, and then if there's, you know, a real shift from those assumptions, you know, that shift's going to occur not just in the Madera subbasin, but it's going to occur, you know, at least regionally, if not statewide. And we'll just have to adjust as those go. So I don't, you know, this is just what's being written in the GSP right now. We just
So-
need to start defining.
so then is there, as time goes by, is there provision in the law for adjustments to,
Well, there's the interim milestones that
you know,
occur.
so at that interim milestone, if a particular GSA or plan for a basin says that, you know what, we were too aggressive on our minimum threshold, we need to adjust that downward. Can it be done?
I'm not sure if we know the answer to that.
You see what I'm saying? Because if it can't be, then what you're asking for, what the state asks for, is more overdraft. Right? If they have a program that can't be adjusted, the average person is going to say, set the minimum threshold as low as you can set it. Well, when I say, you know, as lenient as you can set it, we just keep setting it. You know?
my personal thoughts, and you can't predict what the state's going to do, but it's that we're going to be able to need to show progress. Substantial progress towards reaching our
Right.
goals. Now, if hydrology is impacting the ability of those projects to produce a yield and recharge or do whatever the project is intended to do, I think the state's gonna be willing to accept that, and we'll probably have to make adjustments to our plan as far as our implementation schedules and such, but you've gotta be able to start implementing and show that you are on the track to make change as
Yeah.
quickly as possible.
I think if we dip below minimum thresholds because we've been in a big drought, that's a lot different than we dip below the minimum threshold because we didn't implement any of the projects we said we were going to,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's a
And
much different scenario.
They responded to those questions, at least what I've
Yeah.
heard them say in these various meetings over the years, is that, well, you know, it's a case-by-case basis. We'll have to consider all aspects
Yeah.
of whatever issue pops up.
That's why defining the answer is difficult.
The other thing that trips in my head is time is of the essence to get this done.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, and I get that if we, meaning MID, changes things
Course.
too much from
Yeah.
changes course too much from what they have,
Right,
then we're never gonna get this done.
exactly.
So my inclination is to leave the minimum threshold where it is on this model. And not that I don't think it should be higher, just like
So
Brian.
I mean,
And
optimism is.
And thing is I still, that model line, I still think should be higher, so we'll talk about that at the board, but,
Yeah, I like your comment about setting a goal to beat that.
set a goal.
Right,
But,
The goal shouldn't be to, let's see how much we can overdraft
yes,
yeah,
until we're forced into not overdrafting.
yeah,
The goal should be, let's see how we can make the timetable sooner. Yeah.
okay.
So do we?
All right, so we're almost through this, this agenda item. Rocky. Okay, the last component of this is something that we just, we would like direction on as far as, recommendations from our GSA on what to communicate to the county GSA. So one of the concepts that we've heard is that, the county, so we can look at this trend line here, right? So essentially, if you take, or I could do, should I go on the whiteboard? Okay. I love the whiteboard.
What's the date of that last dot, the up one on the purple?
That was probably 16 or 7.
I think they had
Maybe
17.
17, yeah.
Spring of 17?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they updated it to include up to 17.
Yeah, our 16 and 17 trends.
So it's got a wet year in it, and then we have a regular normal year, and
Yeah.
now we have another wet year, so the chances are that might bounce up a little bit more.
Exactly, yeah. And we have all of our, it's very average across the entire district, but
Are there
our
spring readings yet?
groundwater elevations, yeah, and they're updated on the website. So we have a chart that's average across the district.
Oh, okay.
And we're trending, yeah. So,
But you have individual well data too, if we ask the engineer, he has that for us.
And our
Because
cache-
we have wells on the program.
And
yes,
of course, all of our cache wells are online.
It's all public?
yeah, it's all in
Okay.
the cash gem system.
And they're numbered, how do we identify them? By location?
We can help you.
Okay.
They're on a
Um,
map, they don't give exact locations, but you can generally tell where they are.
Let's see if I can do this here. So, this is similar to this graph. So this is 2020 here through 2040. So, as we've just talked about, overdraft is going to continue to occur through the implementation period as the other GSAs continue to implement projects. So we'll say this is where we sit today, or this is where we're going to sit in 2020. So there's a volume of water here that's going to be overdrafted, particularly by the Madera County GSA. They've called this volume of water many different things, I think, over the last few weeks, including existing stored groundwater. We've heard provisional water. We've heard transitional water.